We are live, and I'm excited for today's episode alongside my co-host Tom Caserto, New York City stuntman. We interview a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt since 2006, former professional MMA fighter, head coach of Mushin martial arts in New York City, health and wellness mastermind, and creator of Rush Fit and the just released Rush Fit 2 with George St. Pierre. Welcome to the Winner Circle, Erik Owings.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get into this conversation with you. And the goal of these Welcome to the Winner Circle conversations are really to uplift, inspire, and empower everyone listening along to move forward with greater faith and trust in themselves on their hero's journey ahead, a process. And our first question sets us up on that positive note, and that is right here, right now. Erik, what do you love about your current world? Not about the external world, but your personal world.
Yeah, I try to, it's a good question. I always feel like you're a bit absurd if you can like write a biography about yourself, but in a way, like, I think that's all there ever is, your scenario, your own perception. It's there again, I have no like formal philosophy or anything, but I'd say probably from the martial arts, I lean a little bit more towards Buddhism, a little bit more Zen. I guess I had to pick because the Taoism's mixed in. And so I guess part of like Stoicism, once I started becoming a big thing, once I read the meditations when I was in my 20s of Marcus Aurelius, you start looking at that and you see these real similar things. So I try to always my internal world and where I'm at. This is pretty much where I'd be at anywhere. I'm usually at a gym or I'm with my family. Unfortunately, because I gotta prioritize my work and my family now, I don't spend as much time as I used to with my friends. But to me, that's like everything. It's like I never watch the news. I don't watch TV. I'll eliminate anything. It's not that I'm trying to live in an echo chamber. I just don't want that kind of that virus or that disease that gets in people's heads of fear. I'm pretty much aware of the bad stuff in the world, the dangers of the world and everything, but I really just focus on my world, my family. And even with my family, I know, like, for example, like some people in maybe my brother, my mother, my father, they don't have the best health habits. I don't let that stress me out. So I always focus on doing what I can for the people I love. And I really just focus on controlling my behavior. And it sounds like a sales pitch, but I believe it's lifestyle. It's just, that's what I would say it is, just pure lifestyle. Like for me, martial arts are part of my life, but it's the training, it's the nutrition, it's the sleep, and it's the little things in between that make up my life. So that's kind of like, I guess you could say, if you had to draw like a diagram and then what came in between, like say training, nutrition, sleep would be the juice of life. But I try to just focus on those things that I can control and then the information that I consume. And I think that's probably the biggest problem today that I just see when I look around, whenever I do go and look externally. In Manhattan, you get a big glimpse. You see a lot of people being pulled by things outside of themselves, and they're kind of disconnected from themselves. So I think that's always the journey everybody's got to take, but everybody will take it when their time comes. Like when they feel ready for it, they'll finally embark on it. And it's always a journey of self-awareness, self-discipline, self-knowledge. What Bruce Lee said, all knowledge leads to self-knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited by that answer. And that's exactly why I asked that first question is what do you love about your personal world? Because like you, I'm not concerned about the news, the external world. I'm focusing on me. It all starts and radiates from there. I listed a lot of titles in my intro of you. Through all those titles, through all your various roles you play, coach, father, creator, entrepreneur, martial artist, what would be your overarching mission that guides you in everything that you do?
So, I'm there again. I'm not of a particular religion. Like, I don't think of like, an entity necessarily, but I meditate every morning and I just do a little mantra. It's not asking for something. It's a reminder. I'm happy, I'm healthy, I'm wealthy. And there again, I don't just measure like wealth as a, metric of how much money's in my bank account. I feel there's all kinds of wealth, and so I go with that. And then I just always, then I guess what I ask for, and I know I'm asking more of myself or reminding myself, just have the strength and courage to do what's right in the world and be a good person. And that means be a good father. That means be a good husband. That means be a good teacher. It means just be a good citizen. And I'm the type of person I could easily snap, right? Like, and just slam somebody if they cross a line. But I really do discriminate, like in how I would snap or something. I mean, I don't go around thinking everybody's just all peace loving and friendly, but I always try to find the best in everybody. And there again, by doing that, I try to just always arrive at each scenario just being the best person I can be. I think that's all you can do, right? Like, so I don't try to, for me, being a father's number one. I would have never imagined until I was. Like, that's the most important thing, my son. Then it's being a husband, right? But then it's my business, it's my friends, it's everything. And I think that's the thing, is I try to just, I could just like probably quote Bruce Lee all day, but it's really just about being a better human being, right? It's like being like more alive, vibrant in the moment. So to me, I don't really have, I guess, a particular point of emphasis. Like right now, giving this interview, this is my world right now, right? And then, after that, I'll deal with whatever I have to deal with after. So I try to just always arrive at each scenario just being the best person I can be. I think that's all you can do right now. So it's basically just being me.
Absolutely. No, I'm loving these answers. I feel you and I have a lot in common and a very similar outlook. But has it always been this way, Erik? Have you always viewed the world from this place? Let's talk about where these principles came into your life, of Buddhism, of Zen, of Taoism, of meditating in the morning, of not reacting with anger, of not watching the news. Let's rewind and let's kind of take a look back at how you got to where you are now.
Yeah. So, I think I try to be very non-biased with myself. I'm probably even more critical of myself than I am of other people. There again, because I'm not usually too focused on other people or gossiping about what they're doing or what they're into. And I think some people, when they tell their story, it's either sometimes it's got an imbalance of they see all the positivity that they had or none of the negativity or too much negativity. It's like they become a victim or in their mind they're a hero. So I try to be balanced, but for me, I think like there again, you can do it compartmentally. Like you can have like more of a spiritual or material, like a yin yang, so to speak. But I really don't, I think like that's the thing, is even that's that dualistic mindset, right? We sometimes look at the positive and the negative and we think they're separate, but really they're actually absolutely necessary. So at what point it happened, it's weird, because I have a really good memory of my childhood, although my parents were divorced. We got displaced a bunch, lots of fights growing up. But we were basically living in a welfare apartment complex, but by Kentucky law, my mom had a car from the divorce. I still remember you could see the road through the floorboard, like it had holes in the bottom of in the car. But my mom kept that so she could get a job, and she made minimum wage, but she had to pay rent at the welfare apartment complex. By Kentucky state law, you couldn't receive welfare if you had a car. At least that's what she said. She might have just been lying, but I think she understood the trap of welfare. Once you get on it, you don't want to get off of it. It's very rare once you start getting that free handout, you become used to it. So we were poorer than people on welfare. So it should have been a miserable time. But for me, actually, it wasn't. It was cool. I had friends. We had a football. We had like, wiffle ball bat. It's sounds kind of psychopathic. We got in street fights like with other kids. We had boxing gloves. And my next door neighbor, who's still to this date the person I have the contact with the longest besides family, literally we lived on the same building, same apartment building, same thing. His parents got divorced. He got displaced. He was from Cincinnati. He had to move over to Kentucky. It was Rich Franklin. He went on to be a UFC middleweight champion. He's a UFC icon. And he lived down the hall from me. Me and my older brother didn't get along too well, but Rich was like my big brother. We literally hung out together every day. And so I did karate as a kid before my parents got divorced. He did karate. I remember we used to go into the woods and practice with tonfas and like nunchucks. And so we watched Bloodsport probably 100 times in the 3 years that we were next door neighbors. Then my parents got back together. we got separated. He was much older than me. He was about 6 years old. I mean, when you're kids, that's giant. And then he moved to Ohio back by his family. We didn't see each other forever. And then after the UFC exploded, we had no contact. This was before you had cell phones and, internet and all this stuff. So it wasn't as easy to maintain communications. Anyways, like I'm wrestling some people up at this Gracie Training Association in Mount Healthy, Cincinnati. There was a bunch of white belts and blue belts. If you had a blue belt, then you were like the bigwig of the area. And this guy, really muscular, big dude. I was like, man, you look so familiar. And he's like, you look familiar too. And I was like, is your name Rich? And he's like, oh my God. He's like, Erik. And like, we hadn't seen each other in probably 6, 7 years.
Oh,
and
wow.
so that journey, it's hard to define when it happened. Because although I was poor, I would save everything and buy like a black belt magazine. I bought Panther Productions, like Pinchak Salat, Arness, Kali, Jeet Kune Do, because I always got all Bruce Lee's books. I mean, everything I had. I mean, I had nothing, and everything I had went towards scouring for information, going to the library. Through Bruce Lee, I found about Krishnamurti, Buddhism. Eventually, it led me to Alan Watts and other people. So it's like there's so much. And then with the internet, like I'd already laid that foundation of self-learning from the time I was in elementary school. So by the time that the internet became a thing, I devour information now, so it's hard to clearly define that line. And I've learned so much over the years from so many people, you know what I mean? Like so I had a chance to be around Rich, before any of us were anything. And along the way, then living in Brazil, you get exposed to new things, new culture, learned a new language. So there's all this stuff. It's hard to define these clear lines, but I would say probably when my mom first put me into karate at 5, but also combined with they never indoctrinated me into a philosophy or religion. They always left it open to me. They never frowned upon anything, because that's a real stifling thing for a lot of people. They want to have an open mind, but the paradigm they got shackled into before they even have conscious memories scares the shit out of them to think with an open mind. And my parents never did that to me. So I think that was a real blessing. They gave me truly an open mind to just look at everything.
Yeah, they didn't put you in a box. What a
I think that's really critical.
Yeah, that's very blessed. So has your passion for martial arts always been there, or has it waned in time, or like since that first karate lesson with your mom put you in, you just have delved into it, you just have loved it, or has there been cyclical nature to it?
I wish I could say that from 5 on it went, but because we were very poor, and we really, for me, a candy bar once a week was like a big deal. So martial arts are out of the question. And we moved around a lot initially. So, and whenever we kind of get our footing, it just seemed like we'd be on to something else. But the area where I grew up, they have a great Pee-wee football league. It's pretty much free. It's like $20 and you get all of your equipment. It's pretty much all sponsored through donations and stuff. And I started playing football when I was 6, and I was pretty good at it. My brother played, and I think it has something to do with always hanging out with older kids. Most of my friends are like 3 to 6 years older than me, and I'd always play basketball, football. So I was always outside doing sports. Martial arts were interesting because I think I already grew up. Me and my brother didn't getting up in the full out fist fights. Like for me, fist fighting was a reality from the time I was 3, 4, like actually getting punched, hit in the face, like getting black eyes, busted lips. So I always knew you had to know how to fight. It wasn't like I thought, this would be cool. It's like, this is a necessity for life. So I was always interested in becoming strong, becoming athletic, but I guess being good at football was kind of a curse, because every year that I would start trying to make the push towards doing that, everybody would encourage me to play the traditional sports. It was football, basketball first, and I gave up basketball, and it was just football. Finally, when I stopped playing football, I guess I had enough wherewithal to know that a lot of the strip mall martial arts, they weren't really going to teach me how to fight. It's like, I probably should have still jumped into it, but I was always looking, because I always felt I was on the cutting edge, because I would pay attention to the trends that going on around the world. And I wanted to learn jujitsu as early as 1993 when I first saw it. I always felt like I'm wasting my time with all this other stuff. In retrospect, it was wrong. There was wrestling, which I actually did. I had to get change my parents to my friends' parents, who my high school didn't have wrestling. The football coach hated it. We had one of the better football programs in the state. So they got rid of the wrestling program because they thought it interfered with football. So I actually switched high schools my senior year just to be able to wrestle. So I knew the path that I needed to take, but that was the most frustrating moment in my life, between knowing I no longer wanted to play football, which I was good at, and knowing what I wanted to do, not having the financial opportunity or the location that gave me the opportunity to do what I wanted to do, and being, for better or worse, a very stubborn person and not willing to kind of like look for an alternative path, which I should, because my parents are very much great people, but hard workers. They just put their nose down and go to work. My dad worked in construction. My mom was a secretary. So they didn't believe in this kind of like alternative path or doing things differently. And I knew pretty much early on, I didn't want to be in school. That wasn't the path for me. Right? I liked learning, but I didn't want to have the traditional learning path. I loved martial arts. I wanted to fight professional MMA. I wanted to own a gym. Whenever I told people this in high school, that common retort was, "You're crazy. Like, how are you going to do any of this?" And yeah, then it kind of, I guess if you want me to keep going down this journey, I can tell you how it all kind of.
Yeah, no, I love it. This is fascinating.
So, I had a pretty wild, by the time I stopped playing football my sophomore year, I went from being a 4.0 straight A student to basically straight Fs. And not because I became dumb, just because I seriously stopped showing up and going to school. I went like, always had A's my whole life. And then I think my geometry grade my sophomore year was a 13. Like I went from like straight A's to basically nothing. And I was really not nihilistic, but man, I was like one of those teenagers that was quick to fight. I was frustrated. I was angry. I just didn't see a path for me to pursue what I wanted to. And me and some of my friends, we would get into a lot of fights. I was obsessed with the UFC. I had like these crappy mats in my basement. I just bring people over to train. We put on boxing gloves and just box. Like I'd punch and hit trees to try to condition iron body. I was like mixing everything I could just to try to become a better fighter. I had a heavy bag. I was going to the gym 6 days a week, 7 days a week, running sprints, doing plyometrics, scouring the world for whatever I could do. But this all culminated into a lot of fights with some gangs, some people. I actually have my own police detail at my high school just because of me, of so many people trying to kill me. I probably had like 6 attempts on my life at different times, eventually culminating in getting stabbed 3 times. One resulted in me almost getting my leg amputated, and they missed my heart by like 1/4 of an inch. So I actually flatlined during the surgery. So I technically already died, and they had to defibrillate me and bring me back to life. And I was 18, and you would have thought that would have been the aha moment, right? Where I was just like, okay, time to, get out of this funk. And it wasn't, like, it's weird. I mean, it was coming back, learning how to walk again. I had a screw in my knee that I couldn't put they had to put it was supposedly to prevent arthritis. This was 2-3 years prior. So I had this already where I had to go 6 months where I couldn't walk at all. And then I had to teach myself to walk again. So within 3 years later, I had to teach myself how to walk again. Everybody told me I got like a permanently deformed leg. Like they literally, I'll show you if you could see, but it's a pretty gnarly scar. And that goes all the way about from the ankle to the knee. It's called a fasciotomy. And then that the veins that they shredded off my leg on the other side. It was supposed to leave me crippled. So I'm technically a cripple. And they said, no, all the physical therapists, doctors, they said, like, forget about sports. You'll be lucky if you can walk without a cane. Like, you're pretty much done for. And I did all my own physical therapy. I probably messed myself up a little bit. I was only 18 at the time, and I knew how to train, but I didn't know the ins and outs of everything. But I was running sprints in 6 months. And, I was training hard again, and I was frustrated. I had an aunt that was living in Hawaii. I tried to move there. It wasn't the right fit. I came back and I was even more frustrated because I was always looking for this path to get me training full time. I had my personal trainer certification, and it was kind of an interesting thing. I was at this party. I was going to a party, I should say. And this was the aha moment for me. So if I rewind a little bit, this is a long story because there's a lot of pieces to this. But after prom my senior year, before I got stabbed, me and my friends, we scored a bunch of cocaine. A bunch of people chickened out, and I actually had a heart attack from it by myself home. Yeah, heart totally stopped beating. I had to pull my car over. I was driving my car when it happened. It was like 8 a.m. And I remember looking in the mirror. I was like slouched over. I'm looking at my reflection in the mirror, and all the veins are bulging out my head. My face is like purplish blue. And I actually thought, like, what a pathetic loser. You're going to die like this. You didn't do anything with your life. I remember having this thought, but instead of becoming sad, I actually chuckled. I remember this like thinking, like, I thought it was like hilarious. You're going to die like this. You're such a, what a dork. You thought this was cool to do cocaine. Now you're going to die. And I swear to, I mean, maybe it's just coincidental, but as I started laughing, it was like that, my heart unlocked. It was like in a cramp. It started beating. I drove home and I made a promise to myself on that day. I will never touch this shit ever again. Like, I'm done. I'll never touch cocaine. Anyways, I was going to this party. It was pretty far away. It was like a 3-hour drive. And me and my friend were riding and we're blazing a joint. And I was like, man, this weed's really good. He goes, well, it should be. It's laced with cocaine. And I was like, man, it's one thing to lie to somebody to cover for somebody. Like, we could all be caught in a scenario where we could justify lying, but lying to yourself to me is just inexcusable. Like I'm going to lie to myself. And it kind of ate at me. We got down, this was on a place in the middle of nowhere in the border of Tennessee. And I remember, man, in the middle of the night, I just got up, everybody's by a campfire. Everybody's kind of in their own little world, all messed up. And I just drove home 3 hours. And on the way, I was like angry. Like, I mean, really, I just felt like I could just I was probably at the only time in my life, I won't say I was suicidal, but I didn't care if I died. I really didn't. I just wanted to get home and change my life. Like it was already changing on the way home. I remember driving, the sun's coming up. Like, I left at like 5 a.m, a 3-hour drive, back roads, probably going faster than I should have been. And when I arrived at home, I told my dad, I was like, I want to go to work at the end of the morning. He's like, okay. He's like, he had a construction company. I went and I passed out, slept about 10 hours. Then the next morning, I remember I got up about 5 a.m. I went to the gym. I worked out for an hour and a half. I went to work construction from 8 till 5. I went to the training association, the jiu-jitsu one, trained jiu-jitsu. I packed all my food. And that became my life for 18 months. I worked 7 days a week. I took off 4 days in 18 months, and that was only to do competitions, to go to jiu-jitsu competitions. I literally worked. So I had another job where I worked at a family fun center, like this batting cage, putt golf, indoor soccer. And if the training association didn't have a class, I worked. I worked Monday through Sunday, 7 days a week, saved all my money. And I said, I'm going to move to LA. I'm going to train with Carlson Gracie. That's what I'm going to do. I saw him as the best, Vitor Belfort. He had his whole squad of killers. It was before they broke off and formed BTT and eventually ATT. And I was like, that's where I'm going to go. That's who I want to train with. That looks to me like to be the best option. And I was going to get a motorcycle. The internet was a thing. Then I was trying to figure out where I was going to live. Like, I was trying to understand the LA area. And then I had my money saved up. I was about ready to go in a few months. And then Carlson Gracie Jr. showed up at a seminar in Lexington and told me he's moving to Cincinnati, which was like 30 minutes from where I lived. The son of the guy where I made the affirmation, I'm going to go there and train.
Yeah.
So I no longer had to move. I changed my work schedule working as a janitor, paid him for a year in full, wound up basically helping him run his academy. We became good friends, and he had a really good blue belt named Pete moved down from Chicago where his main school was. He lived there for about a year and a half. I trained every day, twice a day, 7 days a week, started competing. And then he decided he's moving back to Chicago. The guy, Pete, had already took off to Brazil because he knew Junior was going to go back to Chicago, and he thought I have to step my training up. When I heard he was in Brazil, then I moved there, and I lived with Carlson's mom for a couple of weeks. Then I lived down there for about almost 3 years. I saved enough money. My parents had a little college savings that I never touched, but I was able to live off about $1,000 a month for about 3 years. And I went between Brazil most of the time, training at Gracie Barra, which was like the top academy in the world at the time, that and Playa Novo União with the two top gyms. I lived in Thailand for about 3-4 months, trained at the Fairtex gym. I got a sponsorship from them. And then I had a weird cool experience living in Belgium when I was trying to renew my visa to go back to Brazil for about 3 months, living with one of the first American black belts and these Chechen refugees. They were all like junior world champions in wrestling, kind of like Habib and his crew before it was a thing. And so it was a really interesting journey that led me to making friends with the Gracies. Igor came here first, and I was leaving Brazil. Me and my buddy Kenny Florian were going to start a gym together. We became good friends down in Brazil, but we were going to do it. We were in Kentucky. We were going to do it in Cincinnati and do a fight gym there. We were there for probably like 3 weeks, and Kenny's like, man, I want to fight MMA. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to live here anymore. And so he went back to Boston, started fighting MMA shortly thereafter, did the UFC, right? And
Ultimate Fighter, yeah.
Yeah. And then Igor, we were talking on email, and he's like, hey, if you want, you should just come up to New York and hang out for a couple of months. I have my grandma's apartment, so you can just stay for free. And what turned out to be like a couple of month trip in the winter before I figured out if I was going back to Brazil. Yeah, I've been here for like 20 years now. And, I lived with those guys like me, Igor, Hyan Gracie, Hollis Gracie, Igor's brother, Gregor, his other brother, and a bunch of other Brazilians. We'd all, train together, live together. It was a fun time. And then eventually that led me to having the gym. So it's a very deep story. So feel free to throw questions there or stop me, because I could ramble on forever.
Yeah, no, I have a few. Okay, let's start with you going to New York, and then you competed in the IFL with Renzo Gracie's team. How did that come about? And let's talk about like your entry into professional mixed martial arts.
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to fight. Even when I trained jiu-jitsu, I always took everything that I was doing, and I still do this. I tell my students this. Like, I always assess the metric. Am I controlling the mid-range? So I always, even when I was doing sport jiu-jitsu, I tried not to lose track of why I was doing sport jiu-jitsu. And I did okay. I medaled twice at the Pan Ams at the purple and the brown. I had a couple other really crappy calls, which there again, like, I'm not going to use sympathy for him. Everybody in jiu-jitsu gets crappy calls, but where I also would have medaled at the Worlds 2 times, like where I distinctly got points that they didn't give, because there was like the gringo tax. Yeah. So I didn't win the competition, but I beat, when I was a purple belt, not even 3 years in, I lied and said I was an NCAA wrestling champion. So they let me do the black belt division. And this is when anybody. And I beat 3 black belts that day in a no-gi competition. One was the Brazilian national champ. So I was a good grappler, but I don't think I ever really fulfilled my potential in that regard, because I never took it serious. I looked at it as the competitions were getting me ready for the real stuff. So I was always trying to also cross-train in boxing or kickboxing, but I knew I had to have a good base. At least that's what I believed. That was like the rhetoric at the time. You have to have a base in something. So I was already knee-deep in jiu-jitsu. When I wanted to fight, like I felt like, because New York's, expensive. I was a little bit foolish. I was training full time. I was only making enough money to get by and survive. And, I was really burning the candle at all ends. And we had a really fun nightlife too, so that was where I was messing up. But, I guess I was here for about 2 years, and I was like, man, I gotta do this. Like, if I'm ever gonna have financial freedom, if I'm really going to fulfill this dream of being a fighter, realistically, I should have waited 2 or 3 more years. Anyways, I cleaned up everything, stopped going out, went to Thailand, did a full training camp there, got in tip-top shape, came back, took the gi off, swore the gi off, said I'm no longer going to do this gi stuff. And kind of the same thing is that, I made the declaration, I'm going to fight MMA this year. And I remember the real thing that hit was I went and I don't think it was because he wanted me to go, but one of my roommates was Hyan Gracie, and he wanted me to go to Japan with him, the cornerman Pride. And it was the one Crow Cop fought Randleman, Fedor, I think, fought Minotauro at it. It was amazing. Like, it's 60,000 people, dead quiet arena. You can hear the smacks of the fists and the kicks. And I was like, man, this is what I want to do. We had this amazing weekend in Japan. And when I really said this is what I'm going to do, but I always thought I would go to Shuto. That was my goal. I was being pragmatic. I was like, look, man, I'm going to be going against killers. So I'll do the C class, fight 5 fights. That'll probably take a year and a half. I'll do the B class, fight 5 fights. That'll take about a year and a half. Then if I'm good enough, I'll go up to the A class. And then after A class, there was tons of people going into Pride. I never saw the UFC as I still, to this day, I know everybody makes him a celebrity. I don't like Dana White. I don't know him. I just don't like what he's done. I don't like the Conor McGregorification of MMA. I liked what Pride was. Like, I like this idea of in a quiet arena, you're watching 2 gladiators just going at it like that. So that was the path I wanted to pursue, but I wasn't making money. And then Henzo goes, Erik, there's this really good opportunity. I want to have you fight. It's going to be teams. I hated the idea of team MMA. But he's like, they're going to give you a monthly stipend, health insurance. So you get like, a couple $1,000 a month, health insurance. So you get paid the same rate you would, actually more than if you fought over in Japan. So I said, all right, let's do it. And there again, it became a whirlwind. And it really was just not what I wanted. I jumped the gun. I should have just said no, not taken the opportunity and stayed on the course that I was aiming for. But it's kind of it's a great lesson to learn. I learned it well. Just because it's an opportunity doesn't mean it's a good opportunity. And, so I took it, I ran with it. I did the best I could. But even my first fight, like I won. But, the guy, his official record was, I think, 3-2-1. But he had also 7 more fights that weren't listed on the record. He was the champion of Randy Couture and Matt Lindland's sport fighting event. And it wouldn't count as a sanctioned bout because they fought 3 3-minute rounds. And he was 7-0 over there. So he basically had about 13 fights coming into it. I had 0. Mine never trained MMA. I'd only tried to piece things together. And that's how my career was going. And I still managed to win 3 out of 5. Losing 1 to this phenomenal kid, it's kind of embarrassing at the time when you get beaten up by this 18-year-old kid who looks like he's 15, but he was like 20-0 as a kickboxer with like 18 knockouts and undefeated in MMA. He was like groomed, kind of like a modern day Kolabate or like Rory McDonald coming up. The other
Chris
guy,
Hradecki?
Yeah, he was an animal at the time. And in the IFL, he was like, and there again, I fought. I mean, I still remember this. I fought my fight. I won. I thought I was lucky. All I could think was they were going to be self-critical. Like, man, I got to fix everything. And then they came to me like a week later and said, oh, you need to fight again in 4 weeks. So there was a 5-week turnaround. I didn't get a time to decompress and relish the moment.
Yeah.
Then I got injured for 2 more fights. So within basically a year and a half time frame, I fought 5 fights. I got injured for 2 at the last week leading up to the training camp. And so when I stepped out to take a break, I was like, man, I just can't do this. I told guys like, I quit. Like, I can't do this. And for me, it was a big letdown in a way. Like, this was my life dream and I'm giving up on it. I said, I'm going to revamp. I'm going to fix what needs to be fixed and come back in. And the most interesting thing happened for me. I was at that point really just not enjoying the training. I felt a lot of rivalry and tension within the gym of the guys that I considered brothers. And it was probably, I felt it was coming from them, but probably just as much as it was coming from them, I was giving it out too. Like, it's like, I don't have any hard feelings, but it was a really trying time. I felt like the whole world was against me. I felt like my dream was collapsing. And then when I stopped, I just stopped competition. I'm not going to compete. But I kept training every day. And then a really magical thing happened. And it probably has to coincide with life's dedication, really training very hard 2-3 times a day for years.
Yeah.
Like jiu-jitsu, especially like the no-gi jiu-jitsu just went like someone hit an accelerator. It just skyrocketed. I mean, I remember just really having a couple years there where I felt like, I can't remember tapping to anybody and training in one of the best rooms in the country, just like effortlessly, not even being like tired. I took all of the pressure off. And then it was like weird. I didn't have a reason, just the love of doing it. And that's when a lot of people started pushing, even John, Donner was like, man, you need to compete again. And I was like, nah, I'm good. And that really frustrated a few people around me that thought I could get in there, maybe, now finally fulfill my potential. but it was weird. I had no desire whatsoever. The competitive drive was gone, and I always waited for it to come back. And yeah, I've been waiting for like 17 years now. It's that
Mhm.
I think it's coming back.
Yeah, so let's talk about the ego. Like the ego never arises his head and saying, "Hey, like you get like look at this guy, this young guy doing this. Like you could do that and better." Like, yeah, what have you learned about the ego and not following its lead?
Well, I think we all have a bit of it. I think there's even ego in trying to be egoless. There's all like an idea. So it's all like a trap. It's all like a conundrum, right? Um,
Yeah.
so I what I try to do is I always tell people this when they want to compete too. Is like always say, just don't ever take away the greatness from the person you're competing against. Like there become these corny sayings that become t-shirts, like, right, it's better to be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in the war. It's like, so people, they always use these things, I guess, in a way that I'm not against it at all. Like everybody's got a different way that they try to say, like, what you want to do. But like, there's that one they say, like, my ego is my opponent. My, opponent's like my training partner, something like that. But there is some real truth to that. And I try to always remind myself that if you're going to compete, like, even if you're great, you got this window. And if you don't time it right, I mean, how many times have we seen this, right? Where the guy, when we see him lose in this dramatic fashion, like Anderson Silva, for example, like, when Weidman knocked him out and then he broke his leg,
Yeah.
he'll never get back to where he was before that. Right. And it's okay, but it's just horrible when you see that critical nature of the fans. So if you enjoy doing it and you just want to keep fighting, you don't care about the result, more power to you. I always acknowledge that everybody that you're fighting is just, man, they're so tough. They're so skilled. All of them, even the people like you don't even, maybe like their records, like, 50% winning, 50% losing. Man, when you got to fight them for real and they really need that money or that bonus money or whatever they're doing it for. And I just knew, for me personally, I just don't have that drive. Like, you hear people say that, like, oh, if someone touched my kids, I'd snap, or I think I would then. I think I could have that drive. But like, I'm the type of person, like, if we were training and you dislodge my jaw, I mean, I would probably never want to train with you again. I may want to get revenge right there because it's not appropriate. But like in a fight, I always had the wherewithal, and it's probably a bad thing, of like, there's a ref here. This isn't real. It's like, why am I hurting myself? The pay sucks. I mean, I've heard fans, like, when I was fighting, I remember one time I was about to fight and the guy in the stands like, fucking kill him. And I just remember thinking, like, man, I'd like to go punch that guy in the face right now. I didn't like, I'm about to fight. Like, literally, I'm in the ring about to fight. And I'm just like, God, like, this isn't the right mentality. So for me, that was always my problem. Maybe it's a form of reverse egotism. I don't know, but I never had the motivation. I always kind of admired the guys that did, like, that really could take it dead serious. And I'll tell you, like, I mean, he's one of my dear friends, literally, for a long time, is George. Like, his immense mental capability and it is real for him. And you got to kill George. I mean, that's what he's proved out his career. You got to kill the guy, right? Like, I mean, he'll just fight you to the bitter end. I didn't have that. I'm guessing I've been in the fights where I've been fighting for my life and I could access that. But when I was competing jiu-jitsu, it's like, I don't know, maybe it's just because I know it's a game. I don't know what it is, but I just figured my mindset's not a very effective one at that level. When a guy, because you look at jiu-jitsu these days, for just forget MMA. Like, I watched plenty of guys getting their limbs literally contorted, right? And it's kind of not the game. Imagine, like, if every time I made a basket, you just came up and threw the ball back out the other way. It's like, well, what are we playing here right now, right? Like, is it just take the most breaks? So, and if you're not doing it to be the champion, this is my opinion, maybe I'm wrong. Some people just like competing to do it. I do competitive training, like sparring, like with guys trying to tap me, I try to tap them. When we kickbox, I try to hit them, they try to hit me. But I like the day-to-day fun training as compared to that, like, going out. For me, winning a medal, everyone I won, it was a a routine of mine from the beginning, I'd always throw it in the ocean. I made sure I reminded myself this is not why I'm doing it. So
Amazing.
yeah, but I don't think that's a good competitive mindset. It's like you got to be there to be the champ, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And also, like, if you are not in it to be the champ, like, there's severe consequences of competing in mixed martial arts. Head injuries are very real, and that's kind of what ended my career before it even started. Like, I suffered like severe concussion problems, was put on medical leave, and then had a near-death experience. I was assaulted by a gang. I was hit in the head with a cue ball. I was in a coma for 3.5 days.
Holy shit.
I have a week of amnesia, and that was kind of my aha moment that helped me change my life. But it's like a very real thing is head injuries. So yeah, if you're not fully in, maybe it's best to take a different path. And that's what you did is you quit the professional mixed martial arts world and you decided to pursue your dream of being a gym owner, that childhood dream that you have. So let's talk about the manifestation of that
Yeah,
into what it is now.
that was fun. So when I was like at that kind of like that sweet spot, I just stopped competing, but I was training every day. John Danaher was teaching me every day. I was kind of like with a few other guys, like probably one of his little proteges, right? And I became friends with the guy. We became roommates. He was an All-American wrestler from Cornell, and he became a UFC fighter. And he works in finance too. So he was a very interesting guy. He actually fought in the UFC while being an oil trader as well, like on Wall Street, at a pretty serious firm. And so Danaher would have trained with some fighters because of George. He was starting to get some notoriety. His class was growing from where it was when I first got to Henzo's. But he also trained a lot of affluent, super wealthy people, billionaires, Wall Street icons, like some people. I don't want to drop their names. They might not like it, but some people very heavy, like heavy hitters, like talking like guys that are like at that, George Soros type level of wealth, like super wealthy. One of the guys who trained with him was, I can say his name because we're business partners, a guy named Rich Byrne. He was at the time the CEO of Deutsche Bank, of their securities department. And he actually financed almost all the debt of the UFC. He was very good friends with the Fertitta brothers and Dana White and all those guys. He was doing most of their deals for him. And he was a distance runner his whole life. He hurt himself, which was, in retrospect, the dumbest advice they could give him. It makes me wonder if they even liked him. But they told him, well, if you hurt yourself running, you should try martial arts now, which I don't know if that's the best advice for health. But anyways, he tried Muay Thai with a guy named Phil Nurse, who worked with George as well. Mm-hmm. They said, well, if you like Muay Thai, you should try jiu-jitsu. And then they arranged him with Henzo. Henzo introduced him to John. John started training him. But John would always let other people sit in. That's how I got a lot of info too. He would use me as the uke. I'd drill with the person. And then, so he didn't have to use his body the whole session.
Yeah.
The guy who he'd have sit in was the guy who was my roommate, or a guy who was my good friend, who showed a lot of potential, who John liked, the guy, John Cholish. And so they would always train together in the privates. And then John would work with Rich, the CEO of Deutsche Bank, after. And anyways, one day, John and I were training. I was like, you want to hop in? We rolled around and he just loved it. And he's like, man, I would love to train with Erik. And I had to ask John, you had to go through the whole hierarchy. Do you mind? But Rich he wanted to come to Henzo's 3 times a week, but he wanted me to also train him at his place 3 times a week. So that went from me training him 3 times a week at his place to him offering to be the third roommate for me and John. We've got a duplex apartment. We turned the top into a gym. Then he used to like to train sometimes for 3-4 hours. We were doing like a 6-hour training session one day. And we were getting some lunch and he was like, why don't we just open a gym together? I said, great, let's do it. We started looking. Then the financial collapse happened. This was like in 2008. It took about 2 years to find a place, for the rents to finally correlate to the market. Then we finally pulled the trigger and we opened this in 2010. He went on to be a black belt. He's made his own BJJ Fanatics videos. He started a grappling event called Kasai. That was his invention that he did with Hollis Gracie. probably the closest you would say to rich now in the jiu-jitsu community, with the level of wealth, interest, fanaticism, even if you will, and just being involved in the sport at a training level, would be like the guy Ron Zepps, the guy that has the Studio 540, who did Metamoris. Or
Okay.
not as extremely wealthy, but similar to even like the Sheik of Abu Dhabi. He's like that. He's a guy who could do whatever he wanted to, but he's obsessed with jiu-jitsu. And I was really lucky in that regard. He trusted in my vision. We're a very non-typical gym. You know, it's a small gym.
Yeah.
We were always like twice as expensive as everybody. You have to do a paid intro. And all that is that barrier to entry. It's not like we're just we want to make sure you're serious about it, and you're not just coming in to look for gym wars. So we cater much more, I guess you could say, to a white collar clientele. But it's been a really fun journey. We had COVID really messed us up. I don't think we ever really truly recovered the same way. Before it happened, like if it didn't happen that year, we would have had about 25 homegrown black belts that weren't just being given it for no reason, that actually put in the 6-7 years of hard, dedicated training. And most of them, because we have a wealthy clientele, most of them dispersed and most of them never came back. So, yeah, it was
So your clientele, how you attract these? Is it mostly word of mouth? That's probably the way you guys do that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you straight up, it's not like I'm hiding any information. I've never made money off of my gym. Make all my money through my private training sessions. I've been lucky throughout the years. I think once, it sounds absurd when you say this, like people like, yeah, this guy doesn't know math. But if you took, because I train a lot of wealthy kids too, but if you took the combined wealth of all the people I've trained since I've had the gym and the year prior to it, leading up to it, it's like a couple $100 billion of like accumulated wealth. Like, because it's Manhattan, you know what I mean? Like there's also that, but it's not all. That's what's very interesting, is it's not like word of mouth. I thought that would be the thing, because I was training so many wealthy people when I opened the gym. This is the trick. I'm just gonna create this nice gym and attract the wealthy. And it's not that they don't have friends, but it's weird, man. Like it's because it's such a niche thing. Like they didn't bring as many people as I thought. We used to have all the Victoria's Secret models training here, like doing fitness and stuff, and all the Sports Illustrated swimsuit models. There's this guy that trained all the models. I thought I had the perfect recipe when I opened the gym. I got like already super wealthy, heavy hitter billionaires, investment people, some of the I don't want to say the names, but the names of people are like, holy shit, that guy trains at your gym. I thought it would just attract the wealthy in droves, and then we do classes and privates. And nah, man, it didn't work. Turns out like a lot of wealthy people like training when nobody is around. Like, you know, that's why they also like you to come to their house and train them, and they don't care to pay double your training fee. So it was a little counterintuitive, and some of them just like to go to a place like Henzo Gracie's. It's a little grimy, a little dirty, but they don't mind it too. So my idea initially was wrong, and that was the hard part about the gym, was finding a way to make it work. And so I had to go a little bit more traditional, right? Offering like fitness classes, jiu-jitsu, specials. I did whatever it took to get the business open, to get it going, to have like enough revenue to keep it afloat. But at that point, I started just switching things back to where it turns out my original concept works, but to attract the people, it was an interesting like 6-year journey that I probably, well, I only know it by knowing what I know now. Like, so I could again quicker, but like I was very assured, like, oh yeah, this is going to work. And I think the concept was correct, but I think the way I tried to attract business wasn't the right way. It was an experience.
So what motivates you to keep your gym running now, where you can sustain yourself through your privates, and also you're an entrepreneur as well, we will get into. So yeah, what motivates you to keep your gym running and doing
the group, right? Like it's a good group of guys. There's a couple people who basically just help out other instructors here. And you know, it's a bit of, I don't know, it's kind of like it's my first real business, right? There's that too. But my wife has a good job. And I'm not going to lie, like when COVID happened, I was frustrated at the get-go. I was frustrated during. I still can't get over. I'll bring it up to people once a month who get amnesia about what happened and how just
Yeah.
it was on a global level. It really it ate at me. But the one thing I said out, having a son and having a business, I said, you know what, I'm just not going to do anything. I'm going to, and it goes back to that theme. I started just doing, what am I going to do? Right. I'm going to create passive revenue of X, right? Like online. And this is the story of my life. I get comfortable. I become complacent. I need a change. That was the thing. How am I going to get out of New York? I dug myself into this hole. Now, how am I going to get my family someplace else? 3 months into it, cut out all drinking. And not that I ever drank that much, but said I haven't drank in 2 years now. I'm just not going to drink anymore. That was the only thing I was doing. Occasionally I would smoke a little weed. Nothing in 2 years. Just I'm going to clean that up. I'm going to apply all my knowledge to training and diet to my fullest capacity. And I'm going to get this online stuff going. I'm actually going to have passive revenue where I don't need to be anywhere. And then 3 months later, kind of like the Carlson Gracie story, kind of like being able to run into Rich Franklin, although being separated, like all these little things that happen. George calls me up and was like, hey man, we got the rights to Rush Fit and it's ours now. We're going to stream it. Then Rush Fit 2, it all comes together. It took a while, right? That's one thing I've learned as I get older, be a little bit patient. You can't really force the timeline on things. So if it does very well, all my students already know, I will give the gym, if they want to do it, my investor, like, he's my partner, but to the other instructor, the main guy that works with me, so he can take, if he wants to. If he doesn't, we'll shut the doors and we'll do it all like in a very calm manner, but more than likely I won't be living here. I feel like a broken record. I've been saying this now for 2 years, but by the springtime of next year, we most likely won't be here anymore. We'll be living down in Florida, maybe eventually Hawaii, but that'll be a couple years after. Like, there's much better taxes in Florida. I hate cold weather. My wife does too. So that's probably what we'll be doing. I'm guessing within the next 4 to 6 months.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. I have so many more questions to ask. Let's talk about fear. Where has fear arisen? You've stepped outside your comfort zone so many times, from like the early days, from quitting football, to moving to all these places, to going to Brazil, to going to Thailand, to joining the IFL, to quitting the IFL, to starting your job. Where has fear played a role? Like, does fear not arise for you? You just feel it and do it anyways? Yeah. Like, what does your relationship to fear look like? And what is your advice to others who fear is holding them back from pursuing their dreams?
I think this is where the meditation comes in. It's one of those things, like, if you meditate, you know what it is. And it's not even about sitting down on a cushion or following a breathing pattern. I think everybody does this, but I think there's different types of mind, and there's like that hyper anxious consciousness it starts gnawing at you at all times. I stay away from that. I think exercise helps me get away from that too. Like, my wife will even say it when I'm starting becoming annoying, like, go exercise, like, like get that out of there. But it's there. It's back to what I was talking about in the beginning. The sleep, the training, the nutrition. When those get off, I think what we think is fear, it's just a hypersensitive response. Like, you're too caffeinated, you're sleep deprived, too much sugar in the system. So I think there's that. But then there's like real fear. And so I've always just reduced it back to death, right? And there again, you got to take a decision. I know what's going to happen to me when I die. If I could answer that, I'd probably have a church instead of a gym, right? That's why I'm not an atheist. I'm agnostic. I just openly admit I don't know. I think atheism requires a certain degree of just saying, I know that I don't know, which, how can you know what you don't know? Like, to me, it's always like this interesting conundrum, right? Like, you can't know something you don't know. You can't know that you know or that you don't know. To take a blind faith, that's what I call it, faith, right? Of like, oh, this is what's going to happen. But I think once you digest, you had the near-death experience. I had a near-death experience. This is going to come to an end. Now, I don't know what's going to happen, But so far, my life's about this telling every time that I just trust in the universe, there again, that Taoism, go with the flow, stop trying to control everything, or just steer my canoe in this rapid that's pushing me. That's all I can do anyhow. So as I'm being fearful, I'm disconnecting from the moment, right? So you can't really be afraid. Like even in a fight, I'm never afraid. I'll tell you where I'm afraid, when I'm sitting down watching a friend fight, because I can't do anything. So I always figure if something's gnawing at me, I need to take action. And so what I've learned over the years, though, that could get me in trouble because I'm a very action-oriented person. That's where that, I was going to say with the meditation, it can give you that space sometimes of what you want to react with, just that little space to say, no, that's not you, man. You know, like there's that thing behind it, right? The observer. I guess what the philosophical argument of all times, what is consciousness? What is the thing behind the thing behind the thing? Like, what is that there? And as you sit and meditate, that's all you realize is that all of this noise. So the more we go external, right? You can't do that. So it's really, you can't really be afraid. And if you had to like put it like in a chart, it'd be like people like love and fear. But there again, that creates that dualistic concept that like, if you have fear, you don't have love. And you see people that are fearful that love. It's a confusing pulling of like the heartstrings or the mind strings. And I think that's just it, is the less you try to, I guess, have any formula. That's just kind of it, right? You use no form as a way to form as a way to no form. It's always like a conundrum, like a koan of something. That's where I think that's how you transcend fears, is being here and now. You don't really have a spot to fear if you're actually focused on what you're doing.
And everything that happens to you is happening for you, and just trusting that.
And you got to then use your intelligence. That's the thing, not knowledge, intelligence, my capacity in the moment. That's what genius is, right? That's what jujitsu teaches you. You make the right move. Now you can mess up in jiu-jitsu. Got me, attack. But if you want to have like anything in life, really think about it. It's only the most artificial things that become, and that's what the world loves, is artificiality, right? We like video games where we can hit the reset button, or we can just start over. We can pause things, time out, game. But in the real game of life, like real life, like, you know, the car accident's happening right in front of me. You either make the right move, the wrong move, or afterwards you just go, man, I'm lucky. And usually it's some combination of those three. But the more you make the right move in the moment, that's where you actually live a better life. And that's trusting your intelligence. That's honing your intelligence. And you can't hone your intelligence by acquiring knowledge. You can't hone your intelligence by running to the past, by worrying about the future. You ever seen this documentary Zeitgeist?
Yeah.
It's my favorite part of the whole documentary. I thought it was really cool when it came out, but it's the beginning speech. It's by Trungpa. He's the famous Chogyam Trungpa, the famous Tibetan monk who had sex with his whole congregation, but man, if you listen to that speech and he's talking about it, people constantly jump to the past or jump into the future. The present moment's so perfect all times that people can't handle it. It causes like this, oh crap. That's like when you meet people and you're just having a, like, hey, how's it going? Like, you see people, they start fidgeting, looking to their phone. They sometimes don't know how to arrive at real life. But it's like anything, the more you do it, and most of the time, real life kind of boring, right? You're just sitting around, enjoying your coffee, reading a book, take a nap. People think that when you're living this real life, you're just going to be fist pumping in the club. And maybe, I mean, that would also be part of life, I guess. But the more you're doing really in the moment, where your heart, where your soul, where your intelligence is pushing, all these words I think are just synonyms, right? They're not different things. They're all saying the same thing. If you're, go with God, like con Dios. Like, I mean, people have been saying this all the time. And when you're with God, you're with perfection, you're with intelligence, you're with the awesome power of now. And there's a million books all on the same subject, but they could all be like literally a paragraph. The problem is doing it, right? Turning off all that noise. And that's why I like meditation. I start my day every day like that. And if I start becoming absurd, I exercise and I sit down and breathe and say, all right, here you are right there, right? That's what you really are. And I think as we do that, that's where the magic happens. I think if there's ever going to be magic that happens in your life, it happens right there.
In the present. Is that's what you just described? Is that how we hone our intelligence that you referred to?
Yes. I think we're always intelligent. That's why you look at children. Did you ever see that? It was that study, a guy named George Land. He wrote a book. He did a talk on it. It's NASA wanted him to define geniuses. So he defined genius as your creative imagination, like how many people can imagine something that doesn't exist. And so he took a bunch of 5-year-olds. He said 98% of them exhibit characteristics of genius. Came back, studied the same 5-year-olds 5 years later at 10. It was like down to like 36%. At 15, 12%. In adulthood, it was 2%. So it literally flip-flopped. It was 98% genius, 2% not genius. And he said, what would do that? School. And people hear that like, oh, but you have to learn. And it's like, yeah, for sure. I mean, but kids learn all that naturally anyhow. But
Yeah.
once you get them that was the whole point. When you teach people how to think, you give that box, they might think they're open-minded, but they're not really open-minded. They're conditioned to believe
Programs.
Yes. And that's the thing, is they only follow programs. And so what we consider genius, and even Einstein said that, right? Einstein said, if you want your kids to be smarter, read them fairy tales, right? Like you look at the Finnish people, they don't put their kids in school till they're 7, right? They go the longest without school. They're in school only 5 hours a day, and that includes recess and their lunch. And they have the highest IQ in the world, and they outperform everybody. The only people that perform on par are the Asian nations like Japan, Taiwan, China, Korea. But those kids are studying to make the same results 12 to 14 hours a day on the test. And when you ask Finnish instructors, well, what's the curriculum based on? Happiness. So that becomes the thing I tell everybody. Do you like what you do? And they're like, no, quit. Because a guy who does like what he does, like fighting, that's what I was talking about. A guy who actually wants to get in there doesn't care if I punch his nose over here. He's just going to smile and keep coming. He'll beat me. Even if I have more talent than him, if I'm stronger than him, overall, that's the guy that's going to win. And I think that's the same with life, right? Like you have to love what you do. And if you love what you do, you're just going to naturally do it more and more and more.
Yes. And that leads us to the juice of life. You talked about the pyramid, training, nutrition, sleep, and in the center is the juice of life. From what I've heard of you so far, a huge part of that juice of life is your son and your partner. What are the foundations to those relationships? And yeah, what else is in those things you love in the juice of life?
I think it's in that affirmation that I tell myself every morning. I'm happy, I'm healthy, I'm wealthy. I'm not going to say you can't be happy without the other two. And happiness, you always hear there's very cynical people, or, well, what is happiness anyways? It's like, I'm kind of sad you have to ask that question. Like, you don't know what happiness is? Like, it's kind of like knowing what I think feeling hungry is. Or it's funny how people who can't define happiness, they can always say if they're sad or they're angry. It's like, what type of emotional detachment do you have that you can't define happiness? It's a state of contentment, right? Of feeling fulfilled, a sense of gratitude. So I think you should always aim for happiness, but I think people have a hard time being happy if they're not healthy. And a lot of people, this is the sad part, right? This is where the disconnect comes. A lot of people don't even know what healthy is. Like, it's just this abstract idea, like being wealthy. Most people don't know what being wealthy is because the externalization. I'm looking at this guy who's got a perfect 6-pack, obliques, like, delts peaked out here, tight waist, slam dunking a basketball. And here I am, 60 pounds overweight. And the only thing I feel like I'm good at is eating and playing video games. So I'm comparing it, right? Or wealth. Man, I drive a Honda Accord. That guy's driving a Lamborghini. I have a 1-bedroom apartment. But I always tell people, just like, all right, so you're out of shape. Look at a person with no legs who can't even walk. You're already doing better than him, right? Oh, you're poor, right? So how much did you make last year? Oh, I made 42,000. You're in the top 1% of the planet, right? Travel the way I did. Go to some of the very poor nations of the world. Take a look around. Like, you're doing pretty good. So that goes back to gratitude. That attitude of gratitude starts to build that circular. And that's the thing is, do I want to have this vicious circle that's a spiral pulling me down, or I have a virtuous circle that's spiraling me upward? And I think that's just it, right? You gotta focus on, your health. Because without your health, you're going to have a hard time even arriving at the present moment. When you're in a sugar coma, when you're sleepy, when you're, your energy, your chi, if you will, is just all dispersed and you're being distracted by this and by that. So you go in, right? And I think this is the formula. You go in, you focus on yourself. And in that same process, I think money, like when I talk about wealth, it's like wealth in all things, relationships, career, like real fulfillment. To me, money, and I really believe this, like if someone was a known pedophile, like if they openly admitted it, like I like molesting kids, if you gave me like carte blanche, you could line them up, and I'm not joking, I could decapitate all of them. To me, a step beneath a pedophile, just a step beneath, right on the same podium, is a person who uses money for power and manipulation, knowing how desperate some people are for money, right? So I think if you use money in a manipulative way, it's actually evil, pure and simple. I really believe that.
Isn't that basically like all corporations?
Yeah, well, some. I mean, I used to think like that. And then as you look around, you realize some people really do help. A lot of them use the guise of helping, but really just to help themselves. And one thing that I've learned over the years, I don't preach, but I will not, the same way if I'm not going to kill somebody if I find out they're molesting children, I'm just never going to associate with them. So the moment out of that hundreds of billions of dollars of wealth I've trained, I've probably kicked out an equal amount. Like if I feel they're trying to use like their money as a little bit of like, because they don't understand it, because most people, when they find out how much money they have, they'll do anything to get it. So I think if you're going after money with just blind, like, I just got to get this money, I got to get this and then my life will be better. I think you're in a black hole of misery. So I don't think money's a way to happiness. I think people that think money will make them happy they're not really examining what it does. It actually provides for a necessity to be covered without being worried. And you should already be doing what you want to do. Like, what are you doing? If it's your life, you know what I mean? Like this idea that I'm going to give up 30 years of my life to enjoy it when I'm 65 is like, are you crazy? Have you seen the average 65-year-old? Like, you got to enjoy it now. So that's what I mean. I think people are caught in this circle, this loop. There's a reason why they're unhappy, why they're unhealthy, and why they're not wealthy, yet they don't break out of the cycle. They just keep running on the gerbil wheel, So I think that's the process. You got to calm down. You got to center, right? You got to really be honest with yourself. What do you want to do? Then that might mean like when I was doing my transformation and I was like, 19-ish, 20, when I was working, the 2 jobs, and then I got the transfer and just be a janitor. I never looked at being a janitor as a bad thing. Like I still mop the mats here every day when I get done training. Like I don't see it beneath me. I clean the toilets here, right? I come in and do all the cleaning. I don't see that as a lower thing. One, I'm capable of doing it, but also that's what allowed me to do it, right? Like, so I might have to work a job, and there's a difference between a job and a career, right? I just work this job. It gives me money, but then I pursue the career. So I worked tons of jobs, right? McDonald's, a car wash, construction, but I never defined myself as that. And you see people that do that, right? They get ashamed of a job they're working. We all got to make money if we don't want to. I didn't have anybody giving me money. So if I got to take care of myself, I'm going to have to work. But I think some people, then they get caught in that trap, and we see how it works, right? You just get a nicer pair of shoes. I earned it. And then like, I'm going to get the Starbucks coffee or this. And you start doing, I'm not going to tell people how to spend their money. But what happens is you start digging that hole, you get the credit cards, the hole gets deeper, deeper, deeper. Then that transition. So I always had this theory that worked for me when I was a kid. I don't think it's right now. Like now I see that there's nuance, but it was, don't go in debt. Don't get a girl pregnant. Don't get married. That was my motto when I was in my teens and 20s. And I did that. I think that's honestly why I could pursue it. Now you could go bankrupt. As I got older, I don't think going in debt and going bankrupt in your early 20s would be that bad if you knew what you wanted to do. And I encourage, like, I love it here. I've encouraged so many people to quit their jobs, people that work in finance and other things. I'm always telling them when they're complaining, hey, quit your job. And they're like, huh? Like, hey, quit your job. I just keep telling them, like, whenever I hear someone complaining about something, complaining about the girlfriend, break up with her, dump her. Like, it's obvious, right? You're not happy doing what you're doing. Don't waste your life, because hey man, I hope I get to live to be, I always put 108. If I expire, after that, I'd be like, oh, amazing. I want to make it to 108 years old. Just a number I have in my head. But I'm not absurd. I know I could walk outside the day and that's it. Right. You know what I mean? So, and I think if you know that, you can't live your life wasting your time anymore. It's finite. It's going to come to an end.
Yeah.
So
What if someone doesn't know what they want to do? What would you advise that person?
walk off into the woods, turn off all social media. You got to go inside. It's the same journey for everybody. I don't do psychedelics. There's a bit of schizophrenia and also Huntington's disease that runs in my family. I don't want to do anything that might trigger my nervous system or some schism or something. It's probably an unfounded fear, but people say that DMT is like teletransportation, LSD is like a rocket ship, and meditation is like the rowboat. I'm in my rowboat, each day, just, trying to go a little bit further. But I think it's kind of funny. Like one of the guys that I followed his training, I bought all of his books and DVDs. He was real cutting edge when I was coming up, when I was a teenager, was Paul Chek.
Yeah.
I still like his stuff. I think he's awesome. He's super fit, super healthy. Like he was talking about leaky gut back in the late 90s and everybody said he was a quack. Now everybody can't get over their leaky gut or their microbiome or, so I think he's a cutting edge guy. And I heard this years ago. I've done a lot of these osteopathic exercise courses. This guy, Guy Voyer, it's an amazing group of like really high level practitioners of fitness. But a lot of these guys, what they call checkies. I never even got certified. I just bought all the books and wanted to learn the knowledge. But a couple of people were making fun of him and they're like, man, you heard what he's been doing? I was like, no, what's he doing? They're like, he just takes people into the woods and makes them do mushrooms or LSD. And I was thinking, I was like, damn, he's always on the cutting edge. This guy's a genius. He's like, let's get to the heart of the problem real quick. Right. Mm-hmm. You're 35. You can't stop eating Snickers bars at nighttime. Let's go trip balls in the woods. I'm going to shake some rattles. You're going to draw something on a chart. And then we're going to go back afterwards and realize it was your childhood trauma that's making you get the comfort from your food or whatever. So I think if you want the accelerated version, that seems to be smart. But there's a part of me too that drug use was a very common thing growing up with the friends I was around. I knew more people that I hung around with that did LSD that didn't. None of them went on to invent Apple or Google. Most of them are on welfare. Like, so I don't also think it's like this panacea that everybody's now like all psychedelics are, like they're the best thing. I think if you're on the path, they're a tool like anything, like a barbell. You could use it to get stronger, right? Like you don't need a barbell though. You can get stronger using your body weight. You
could also use it to drop it on your head. It's just how you use these tools.
Yeah, like a hammer. You could use it to build a house or kill someone, right? Like it's a tool, and it depends on how you use that tool. But I think, how do you find out where you are? You got to get in touch with yourself. So if you feel like you're just keep wasting your time, maybe that's the thing. And if you look at, from what I've read, most of the people who use psychedelics who tend to really turn it into a net positive usually never use them again. Mm-hmm. It calls the aha, then they realize, all right, this is what I'm going to do. Right.
You apply that. I just want to be responsible with your time. We've shared so much wisdom here. Tom has been sitting there so quietly, and I'm sure he has a question he'd like to ask, and then I'll close with a final question. Tom, anything that is on your heart that you'd like to share and ask Erik?
You guys already, Erik, you already answered all the questions I was thinking about, but do you ever get tired of training and take long breaks? Because doing my martial arts and stunts and stuff, I found myself getting becoming really tired and not motivated to train and switching to more like music stuff. And I was just wondering if you ever get tired of all the training that you do, because it seems like you do a lot of training.
Yeah, one of the things I learned with John Donner, I try to train daily, but within doing that, I learned this a long time ago, and I'm a big fan of other martial arts, right? Like my son does Taekwondo. You watch it, like anybody that watches, been real fights, is like, oh, come on, but then you're thinking about it like, well, wait a second. If you watch world-class Taekwondo guys, like a guy like Raymond Daniels, you're like, man, this guy would literally kill you, like if he kicked you. And that's the thing is, so the forms, right? That's like kata, right? I mean, like that, that shadow boxing. I mean, this is something like everything that every martial art they have these things in it. And sparring would be part of it. But I think that's what happened with the modern martial arts movement is everybody went into, we got to get to the reality of combat. We got to do resistive training. We got to do hard pads, hard sparring, hard grappling, takedowns, groundwork. But if you look there again, there's always like telltale things. Like George, for example, he never trained as much as most people did. And I was training at an elite level and around people. And everybody I saw that trained too much, they just overtrained. So those light things, the kata, yeah, that's good for teaching kids, but shadow boxing is a mainstay, right? Dynamic stretching, what they call active recovery in the Soviet Union. When Michael Yisus went over there, he saw those strangest looking soccer team. He's like, man, your soccer team's big. And the coach kind of looked at him. He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, that's the weightlifting team. They're doing active recovery. It wasn't even a concept here. We think of like Rocky Balboa and this idea of linear progression, right? Whereas if you look at life's a wave. Now you could draw a line, right, to see it, but it would be a wave of an up and a down, and eventually there'd be an upward trend. And as we get older, it's not necessarily that the trend has to go down, but the gap in between, we have to give more recovery time, right? So I think that's the other thing. There's nothing wrong with having the rest day. What I do is typically light workouts. Like before I did this, I just did a dynamic stretching and shadow boxing routine. Like tomorrow I'll drill, I'll spar, and then on Saturday I'll do hard sparring and sprints and plyometrics. But I'm not ashamed to take like 3 days nice and easy. I also walk a lot. I do like little snacks of mobility. But that's what I think I picked up when I stopped fighting is I give myself that opportunity to just do what I want, how I want, instead of doing like this regiment that I have to do this. But I think that's the main thing is like, doing a little bit of something that's maybe not the best is better than doing nothing most times. And also have that wherewithal of how to switch the program. Sometimes I'm focused on strength, sometimes power, sometimes speed, sometimes mobility. And with the fight training, most of it's drilling, just working on it. And then I tend to limit my sparring to 20 minutes a day. Habib Nurmagomedov, when he was in his prime, there's a speech of him giving his fighters. And it's funny, these little things, it's nothing fancy. It's just him talking to his fighters. And he says, if you want to be world-class, you got to train 30 minutes a day, meaning grappling. 30 minutes a day, that's not that much. Now, granted, you're wrestling a bunch of studs, right? But you're talking about the guy who's the apex predator of the UFC, only saying you need to grapple 30 minutes a day, every day. But I'm sure they take a day off because they're devoutly religious. So that probably means 6 days a week. So only 3 hours a week of time under tension. And that's why I don't acknowledge the calorie burning modality. I think it's a totally erroneous, like just fake paradigm. I'm going to burn calories. I'm going to pay a penance for what I did yesterday. I look at skill development. How can I develop a skill? So I put strength, mobility, power, martial arts technique, whatever it is into that. And that makes it fun. I'm just trying to improve myself bit by bit, day by day. Instead of like, I got to hit this marker because someone gives me this arbitrary number. I need to jump this high or lift this much or whatever. I don't pay attention to that.
Yes, no, thank you so much for that, Erik. My final question for you, through all the highs and lows that is this life, that is this hero's journey, what would you say has been your greatest life lesson that you've learned on your path thus far that you feel in this moment most true to you to share?
I mean, there's so much that you learn, right? But if I had I'm like a broken record in this. It's ultimately, there's nothing outside yourself. Actually, let me show you something. Like, so this is, I'm not going to quote it I don't put too much stuff up here in my gym, right? Like I'm not a very decorative person, but there's one thing, and it's corny. It's like that, gardener, warrior in the garden is better than a gardener in the war.
Yeah.
But that's a poster. And you know what? He might not even have said that for all I know. I'm not going to even ever research it. I don't need to. But I'll tell you what it says. It's kind of like scribbly painting, but it's Miyamoto Musashi.
Yes.
It says, there is nothing outside of yourself that can ever enable you to get better, stronger, richer, quicker, or smarter. Everything is within. Everything exists. Seek nothing outside of yourself. That's what I would say. That's why I put that poster on the wall. When I read it, I was like, yeah, that's a great motto. Maybe people will pay more attention if Musashi said it instead of me saying it in some different way, but essentially the same thing.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And I feel like that's what you've been talking about this last like hour or so of conversation. So it's been a true pleasure, Eric. I feel we could talk forever. I feel our frequencies, our vibrations are similarly aligned, and I'm really grateful to have this conversation. For people wanting to connect with you, they can find you on Instagram at Erik Owings, and they can buy your new program that you've created with George St. Pierre, available online at rushfit.com.
Yeah.
To close every episode, we bring our fist in together, a choice, a stepping into the winner's circle. Boom. Thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Yeah, it's great talking to you guys.
Yeah,
You
and that's
too.
a wrap.
Sure.
That's
All right.
a wrap on today's call.
All righty, guys. I'll talk to you later.